Hi, I'm Laura.
Hey, I'm Stefan, and you're listening to Attributed, a podcast library by Dreamdata.
The purpose of it is to store and share all the knowledge that we have gathered across Dreamdata employees through our LinkedIn Lives, podcasts, and webinars.
The typical topics you'll find here can be stuff like marketing,
Sales,
B2B ads,
operations,
social selling maybe. Hello and welcome everybody to today's Attributed session. Today we're going to talk about a major shift in B2B marketing. That is how LLMs are reshaping everything we do, and in this case, particularly how we do content and how our companies gets discovered by these LLMs, where everybody does their research nowadays. Just before going live here today, I was chatting with ChatGPT about how many people actually use LLMs to do weekly research now. And it said, like, when you clean out the numbers, it's around 1 to 1.5 billion people who are weekly active users on LLMs across the board. So this is a massive change in consumer, in research, in B2B behavior, and it's less today about clicks and traffic, and it's much more about being cited and recommended and trusted by these very big models. So today's question is really like, how do we actually get our companies to show up inside of AI? And I'm super duper happy because today we have a very competent panel to help us get smarter on this topic. I just said before if you started. Very selfishly, I'm super interested in this topic. So I'm really looking forward to picking you guys' brain. And as I said, we have a panel here today of 3 people, so I'll have to stay quite quiet during the conversation and let the panelists talk. But before we get into today's topic, I think it's just good for everybody to get to know who's here, who's the panelist. So, Daisy, why don't you do the start introduction of who you are and what you do for a living?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Daisy. I very recently left a company called Cognism, where I was leading on their SEO and AI search strategy. And I've just this week actually joined a B2B SaaS marketing agency called Rocket SaaS as their head of SEO. So I want to be sort of building out the SEO and AI search service function over there for clients, and kind of building out from the ground up and taking a lot of what I learned in my role at Cognism with me.
Fantastic. And then we can do halfway around the world to Anna in California.
Hi, everyone. My name's Anna Puig. I lead go-to-market engineering, and I'm also a growth marketer at Orb. I'm really excited to join everybody today, and I'm coming to you from San Francisco in California.
Fantastic. And Suraj, back to London.
Yeah. My name's Suraj. I'm content marketing lead at Aikido Security. And my background is as a B2B tech journalist, and now very much working on the content marketing and comms side of things.
Fantastic. I'm really happy to have all of you guys here. And I wonder what the soft question we should open with here would be. But how about we just do a quick round of kind of like the overall take of how kind of you guys have observed this change that has happened within the last couple of years with the LLMs becoming big parts of content. Now, obviously, there's no right or wrong answers here. So just kind of from the top of your head, Daisy, if you start, kind of how has LLMs changed how you go about your content work?
I guess the biggest change from my side is the depreciation in traffic. So now, like previously, obviously, you'd sort of type in a Google search that would then surface your like list of top 10 pages. And then the user would go forth and click on one of those, usually within the top 3. However, now information is just served within chat, and you can add sort of a lot more constraints and specificities with what you want the answer to surface. So I'd say for me, that's probably the biggest change I've noticed. And then as a knock-on effect, obviously the decrease in traffic and a bit of a nightmare at the moment in terms of attribution to show that this type of work is working.
Yeah, I think I've heard it called the crocodile inside of Google Search Console, where your impressions are going upwards, but the clicks
Yeah,
to your
yeah,
website are
absolutely.
going downwards.
And that's even like further complicated by the fact that there's a lot of sort of these crawling tools. There's sort of quite a lot of speculation that those are
Mm.
also like inflating the impressions um, as well. But yeah, so lots of complexity.
Super cool. Anna, what's your like first impressions of this new LLM world?
I love it. So firstly, we center our stack around dream data at Orb when it comes to our attribution intelligence. And that's actually fundamentally changed the way that I approach my role. Um, the advent of AEO and having to make your content both indexable and readable by machines. I think for companies that are maybe a little bit behind in embracing AI in their workflows and giving those resources to their employees, I think that they're probably going to have a tougher time adapting to this world just by nature of the fact that in order to make content that's indexable and readable by a machine, a lot of times that means having your machine write some of it or at least help you format it or assist in an ongoing way. So I think you've really got to lean in. And I think that's the biggest challenge that I'm seeing a lot of folks encounter. But conversely, from my experience, I have been an early AI adopter. I started using ChatGPT years ago to help me prep documents
Mm.
just for my own work for efficiencies. And so the more I kind of lean into this technology and the more access Orb has personally made available to everyone at my company, the more it's really just become an asset and it's made how we work much more connected and collaborative. And I'm really excited about the changes, but I'm definitely also seeing the things that Daisy very astutely pointed out in regards to inflated traffic and SEO performance.
That's good. We have a positivist here. Suraj, have LLMs made your work harder or easier, or how do you see it?
It depends. It depends what kind of hat I'm wearing, I guess, because as a consumer, yeah, obviously it's amazing, right? You get, as a user, you get an answer directly. You don't have to do the legwork of searching through the links and then but on the flip side, that kind of also is a negative because people are now taking the answer as gospel, and like it's not always gospel. So a lot of that kind of lazy human nature of, okay, we'll just believe the first thing that comes up rather than let me actually verify that through using different sources. So as a consumer, great. As a marketer, not so great, as Daisy said, the attribution not so great. And it's, we're seeing some things, using some of the tools that we have, including dream data of like LLMs picking up in increase in terms of the signups we're getting from LLMs, etc. But the actual attribution and making sure that's right is very, very, very difficult. And then finally, as a writer, especially as a previous journalist and as a content marketer, I'm seeing both sides of this. So, we started using AI heavily, which I was pretty, not ecstatic about. And then we realized this isn't our brand, this isn't our voice, it's not why we're hiring writers. So we've kind of rolled that back a lot, and we're actually doing a lot more opinionated stuff. And but as editing other people's content is becoming more difficult because everyone is just piling on with AI generated content. So yeah, many different views, but overall it's just a new challenge for all of us to kind of embrace.
Absolutely. There's so many dilemmas and opportunities and negativities you need to be aware of in this thing. So I hope we can kind of touch all of these while we continue here. But let's just do from the like A to C. So kind of what is the fundamental thing that is like in your view kind of changing, given that we used to just have now we go to Google and find information to now there's more these answer engine kind of thing. What is the change in the behavior? How do you describe this to people that would want to understand this? Daisy, you want to start?
Yeah, I think it's just obviously added another layer into the buyer journey. So now, I guess, like I've seen quite a few pieces of research that users are going to these LLMs first to initially find a kind of like shortlist of like say like B2B vendors in our space, and then they're actually going to Google to kind of verify a lot of it because they don't quite like fully trust what's the LLMs spit out, and they would want to check that it's actually correct. It's probably the right thing to do. So I think that just obviously adds like another touch point, which in some ways I suppose is a good thing. It gives you kind of more opportunity to surface yourself in across that space. But again, as we spoke about earlier, it adds even more complexity with the attribution because they might not click through to your website at that point. And likewise, your site might not even be surfaced there. It might be from a third party site. So I think, yeah, it's kind of, again, like pluses and minuses.
Yeah, and how do you see that what's the fundamental change in your point of view?
We noticed a huge surge in traffic to our website. And as a billing and pricing company, we recently went through a rebrand. And so we are now Orb, the revenue design company. And one thing that I found really inspiring about how my team has approached this is we took the inflation in traffic and we took our fantastic product marketing and content teams and we got together and we decided, okay, we as a team cannot really goal based on traditional marketing metrics anymore. Like we can't use impressions or click through rate as a reliable way of understanding that like our campaigns are working. So let's goal to something more aggressive, like opportunity set to a certain percentage or accounts engaged within a cohort in our ICP TAM. That has been difficult to implement on the organizational level, but now that I think we're really into the swing of things, it's just changed how we approach stuff because it's much less about like, oh, my campaign got this many views or this many clicks to like, oh, the leads that I'm getting are the right ICP at the right time in the right geo for our sales team to swoop in and make a quick opportunity conversion. I think what we've been able to do that's made that possible is a consistent drumbeat of brand and content that we repost across all of our social channels just to increase that indexability. And we just trust the fact that we can't rely on those metrics anymore. So when we do review metrics, like with weekly agency meetings, I also run our paid media strategy for all of our paid channels. Those are things that we look at as one aspect of campaign health, but it's no longer how I evaluate the success of any given growth marketing program.
So interesting. There's so many things happening. I think about it a bit like kind of with these LLMs, the traffic you see from them is a bit like the tip of the iceberg. Like so much decision making and behavior is inside there that you'll never get to see. And you only see if they actually click through on a link inside of the LLM, inside the ChatGPT, and head to your website afterwards.
Or it
So,
might not even be a human, it might be an agent that's
yeah.
hearing or signing up. We just released an agentic wallet feature. And so we're making agents our customers now. Like I couldn't imagine that. Yeah.
I didn't even consider that element, Anna. Can you say a little bit more about what that means if it's an agent doing the research and then clicking through to your website? What's down that rabbit hole?
To keep the rabbit hole as high level and like
Yeah.
actionable for folks as possible without getting too technical. If you have a product-led growth motion and you have made it possible for people to sign up and you are getting signups all of the time, right? Uh, you need to make it possible for agents to also sign up for your product. And we're very quickly moving into a world where agents' technologies are being provisioned budget and they have buying power now. And companies are entrusting the agent to go out and purchase something. And for me in GTM engineering, it's like I think about integrations, I think about integration marketplaces. Like we've all sort of grown accustomed to connecting a million things. So like dream data, for example. But the companies that I think are really leaning into these changes are also thinking about agentic customers and what servicing them actually means. And it's fundamentally different from what a human needs. Um, but humans are at the other end of that equation. So I don't even know what you do there. It's pretty amazing.
That's fantastic. You're definitely San Francisco native in like how far ahead you are in this. Suraj, what's the fundamental difference in like search behavior discovery that you kind of think about as the world was just with Google and now just all these LLMs out there?
Yeah, I think it's well, I guess one of the things that we've kind of glossed over, which we all knew when LLMs came about, was the long tail kind of part of it. So people are actually digging deeper into very specific questions and therefore very specific answers, and that's how you usually surface your brand if you actually tailor your content or and actually answer those questions that people are asking. As Daisy kind of mentioned, people's I think everyone is now using ChatGPT or an equivalent at some point in their buyer journey to make that comparison, and we're seeing it in our conversations with customers directly because they're copying and pasting in things into Slack saying, hold on, your product doesn't do X or Y. Again, taking it as gospel because the LLM said so, or comparing it with an alternative product and saying this is how they do better. What do you say to this? It's a real challenge on trying to position yourself and to answer those things and get picked up on those, but also positioning wise. So if you're trying to go for a new vertical or a new if you're trying to go more up market and have all this time been known as something else, or in terms of Anna, like you're repositioning your whole company, it's then a whole flip in terms of you need to do a lot of legwork to kind of make the LLMs realize that you're actually doing something new or that you're now available or applicable to like enterprise, not just startups, for example. So there's it's because people can be more specific and ask, is this tool for enterprises that have X amount of developers? You really need to factor that in when you're putting your content strategies together.
That's super insightful, Suraj, and I can only agree agree to that. If we try to let's help people understand how these LLMs index, and I know they differ a little bit across Gemini, ChatGPT, etc. So I think we should, if we can do like a section where we say, like, how do they generalize index information? Then what do you do on page? And then what can you do off page afterwards? Daisy, do you want to give a shot at kind of how do they generally like index information? I know there's no kind of perfect answer here.
Yeah. Well, I think what's really interesting about them is they have kind of different sources that they sort of rely on. So what ChatGPT likes to reference versus something like Perplexity is different. I know there's like been plenty of studies done that sort of can show like what each of them likes to reference. So I think that's one kind of layer of complexity that's interesting about them in terms of how they index. And then I think what is really interesting here as well is how they are eating top of funnel content. So when you do an LLM search on a kind of generic search term, let's say something like outbound sales, it generally won't go to citation sources to pull out that information. It will generally sort of draw in its training data, which is data that it would have been trained on either at the sort of start of its go live date or sort of smaller training cycles in between. So really, unless you're appearing for searches that trigger a branded search term, branded sort of brand, the LLM doesn't generally go to cited information, which is, I guess, what you would determine as the new kind of ranking. And then similarly alongside that, you'd get the sort of brand mention as part of that as well, which again sort of forms part of this new, it's not ranking, it's something like completely different. And there's kind of, I guess, like sort of twofold to that. So you need to, well, sort of threefold, I'd say. You need to be working across like a variety of like multimedia. So, for example, some LLMs love to cite YouTube, and that's become a really big factor for them. And then across your own domain, you really need to be focusing on like bottom of funnel content. And I know for a fact that this works because it's exactly what we did at Cognism. It's exactly what we implemented across the SEO strategy. And you can see in a lot of our sort of related, like non-branded, sort of like more generic, what I'd call like generic searches that are across terms like, you know, best like B2B data provider or something like that. I can see that the LLMs are pulling from those pages. And it's triggering the citation. And then the other piece is your presence across third-party domains. So, you know, really making sure that your brand is appearing across authoritative domains that are not yours as well. And this is not really a new concept. It's something that, you know, we used to do at Cognism. I think we sort of called it like surround sound, and some SEOs call it that as well, where you'd, you know, reach out to third-party websites and sort of ask to like reference your brand if the content's relevant. So yeah, I think there's a lot of complexity in the way they show up information comparative to Google. Yeah.
That's a good start. Anna, anything you wanna add to that?
Sure. When I think about AEO visibility, quick sidebar, one way I don't recommend you try to increase your AEO visibility on LLMs is to do what a former founder I worked with did, which was just relentlessly search for his brand in like ChatGPT, in Perplexity, and then one day like exclaim in the office, "Oh, look, it finally mentioned us correctly." And I I don't think that it had as much to do with him searching it as he thought it did. Had much more to do with the fact that the growth marketing team had released a bunch of new content that matched the drumbeat of the brand, that also echoed like our documents, and we'd done a complete website overhaul to make sure that our tagging and our indexing was all much more machine readable. And so that really is the key. Like to Daisy's absolute points, like huge +1 to everything that you shared. One way practically that I put this into practice is we run a lot of document ads and a lot of thought leadership ads on LinkedIn because we know that they're more likely to get pickup from third parties for resharing and cross posting. And LLMs, in my experience, seem to care about, is the content on your website easily findable? Like, is your messaging concise? Does it echo what third parties are saying about you? And that's a lot easier to achieve if you have something like a document, with like our 67-page pricing AI agency book, that gets shared and reshared, and also by influencers in our network. And then they're all saying like roughly the same thing about the guide. And so we've seen a lot of pickup with our content just because of that strategy.
Yeah, I've seen the LinkedIn team pushing heavily that in LinkedIn post now gets very much used in LLMs, and I understand why they want to push that message, because the more people that are posting inside of LinkedIn, the more time people spend there, and the more ads people click, and the more ads they can serve, and so forth. But I think it's also fundamentally the LLMs also likes that there's an actual person that works at a company that says this is the truth, as opposed to the Reddit community where it's random anonymous person posting the same kind of knowledge.
That's such a wonderful point because LinkedIn, you know, as an ad platform, and we all have our favorite and our less favorite ad platforms. I love LinkedIn just for the sheer granularity in its targeting and the fact that people are, it's a self-updating database because people always want to like post their new job and, talk about what they're doing. And everyone is kind of engaging in this like either, formal thought leadership exercise or even just casually like wanting to have an opinion and share things there. So yeah, to your point, Stefan, we've seen a lot of like some of our best attribution comes from our LinkedIn campaigns. So making those like document ads as frictionless as possible enables us to get more email addresses, which then enables us to de-anonymize those folks when they get to our website, which then gives me better granularity in terms of visits and traffic and attribution. And with inflated traffic numbers that we're all seeing, that causal chain we're reaping benefits of that in a more structured CRM even.
Yeah. So Raj, what's your overall take on how these LLMs work, or how they kind of find information and serve the information to the users? And this is not the science we're doing here. It's just like our
Yeah.
own
No, I mean, it's a
experience.
combination of all of these things. I think I do think that some of those things are still, like, the Reddit side is still important, and the reason I think it's important as well, and why Google obviously bought Reddit, is while it's anonymous, it is they're super strong on making sure that you can't, astroturf, you can't be a marketer, you can't promote things quite clearly on there. So I do think it's a valuable tool. People do think it's an authoritative source or resource. But alongside that, you got, your G2s, your Gartners, your etceteras, which are always credible for SEO beforehand anyway. But they're also, very credible for the LLMs. And the other thing that's not been mentioned in terms of third parties, yes, you can go to those other kind of listicle sites, etc., but is the PR perspective, which as a previous journalist, I think is a great callback to making journalism kind of important again, because up until this point, Google has kind of, given us that clickbait, kind of those cheap links, and LLMs are kind of bringing back that authority for these high authority websites, these publications that want to do good journalism. And therefore, if you can get cited, get your brand cited in these third-party publications through PR, having original research, for example, which also you can then do the LinkedIn thing that Anna's kind of talking about. But that is kind of the best kind of win at all kind of strategies. And I think that's why now PR and content and growth are coming very much more aligned into kind of one place. So yeah.
There's so many paths we can take here. But I just want to stay on the PR thing, because we just hired a PR agency for the same reason. And like, as I understand the mechanics of how like Google versus LLM. So Google, they loved a good link on a topic that pointed to your website, whereas that is not part of how the LLMs, like, they're not counting amount of links to your website with a certain anchor text. They're scanning the text for topics and then brands mentioned next to the topic. And that is hence also why like PR is probably back on the menu for a lot of companies. I think both the pitching way, where you go to journalists, but if I were Presswire or somebody else, I would also be pushing that you need to bloat this story out on many domains, so the LLMs will index your brand next to certain topics. Suraj, is that what you're thinking as well?
Yeah. I mean, the Newswire is always, again, I guess for SEO, has always been a play as well, like using the Newswire. How useful it is for LLMs, I've seen some research saying that it is, yeah, as you say, it is useful. For example, if you're a startup and you're alongside an AWS or another big name, or you've got some integration with them or whatever, great, have that on the wire. If you want to be cited, for example, in a different way, if you want to just increase your visibility overall, I think it's more important to go the kind of pitching route, and that's how you get your stories, your kind of important people, your CEO, your CTO, mentioned in the press about whatever topics that you are meant to be talking about, whatever things that your product helps people to do. So yeah, I think that's the more important route, but you should definitely be probably playing both those sides.
Daisy, if we zoom in on what you can actually do on your website or on your blog post, I assume you guys at Cognism, as you were highly skilled in most content disciplines, what were the things you started doing different after these LLMs started to explode?
I'll be honest, I don't really think there was anything too different to what we were already doing. As I mentioned, we had a very much like bottom of funnel focus, but I think what I will say about LLMs is that I don't think it should fall just on the responsibility of SEO to help a brand show up in them. I think it's kind of an unfair expectation, to be honest with you. What really is interesting with them is that, in fact, the sort of messaging of your brand becomes so much more important than it has ever been before. Sort of with LLMs, I think it's so important that you have a really clear message that you want to take to market, especially to stand out against your competition. Sort of previously at Cognism, sort of more generic searches would always typically kind of point towards the market leader. However, if you add kind of more constraints to the search, then it kind of is able to like set your brand apart and focus on like where you win. So for us at Cognism, that was European data and really, sort of leaning into that, like in our proof points across our content. I guess that's kind of a shift. So we sort of maybe went back through all of our sort of bottom of funnel pieces and really made sure that that was coming across, adding in sort of key data points as to like how we can prove that kind of thing. But yeah, like I really don't think there's like kind of one tactic or strategy you can use across your content to show up in LLMs, because it really does come from your messaging. I think it's going to become increasingly important for SEOs if they are going to generally sort of be the person leading on this drive internally to better partner with marketing, like sort of product marketing, other people in marketing, and sort of the rest of the business, really, to help like translate the message you want to take to market into these systems. But yeah, I don't think their responsibility should just fall on SEOs.
It's probably also unfair. But you did say, like earlier, you also said the way people write in LLMs is different. You don't write like in Google, you would just write CRM system and then.
Yeah, definitely.
But
So
here you'd be much more specific. I've
yeah,
Raj
you can
said
be,
like
yeah.
CRM
So
system for B2B companies in UK or something like
yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, we had a sort of lot of pages around our like European focus, and I suppose that really helped to position us. But yeah, like I think gotta become really clear on what you're good at, especially if you're not the market leader.
And your title is growth. So like imagine you're kind of a new hire in a new company, and you had like, let's say 90 days to kind of increase the AEO visibility dramatically. What's kind of the approach you would take to get something moving here?
I love this question. And also to Suraj and Daisy's points, I think one thing that we haven't quite hit on is the dichotomy between the craft of writing and having an authoritative voice in a space that's echoed in a concise way across third parties and other people with subject matter expertise. And then there's like the content and tagging that you need to have in your website for it to be read by a machine. And I don't think the two things need to be counterintuitive to each other. I think that you can have extremely high quality writing that is also indexable. But I think to Daisy's point, it takes an immense amount of cross-functional work across your agencies, across ads, across SEO to make sure that like, hey, our keyword universe makes sense with the brand that we're doing. This is how people actually search for us and find us. So if I had 90 days to fix AEO, the first thing I would do is get a good web dev and dig into our website and just ask as many LLMs and humans as possible. Hey, how is our site indexing? Where are the gaps? Because LLMs, if you plug a domain into, we have like Glean, ChatGPT, and Claude at Orb. If you plug your domain in there, it will give you, you can take it with a grain of salt, but it will give you like, hey, this is how readable it is to a machine. And you can actually improve that as you add more content and you make these changes. And that's something that I've seen just qualitatively with my own, like, hey, Claude, did we do a good job? How's that working? So once you are confident that you've got your site indexing appropriately, I think it's also like setting expectations, especially as like a new growth person, to leadership of, hey, our brand, if it's not in a concise place, it's not going to get there overnight. However, if you do have crisp messaging, if you have, you know, I would want to make sure that our teams are investing in building more content that's indexable, getting on like analyst listicles, things that are really easy to read and interpret. You're going to be doing a lot of volume. And this is where I think people like marketers, especially like I majored in English, I was a Shakespeare scholar. I do feel like sometimes LLMs are associated with the death of art and writing. It doesn't have to be the case. I think you can use LLMs to like advise you on what kind of content to create to fill in the gaps in your brand's unique AEO thumbprint. And then you can hire great humans like our product marketing team and our content team to really dig in and like write that stuff. And so once you've got your site set up, you've got a good body of content, then it becomes an endurance marathon of, okay, every single time our team produces an ebook or another piece of highly indexable content, we're going to have our CEO post it. We're going to have our founder post it. We're going to post it on Reddit. We're going to post it on all of our social media sites. We're going to make sure that it's referenced in a good way in our product and in our blog. And then you just have to give it time. You can boost things with ad spend. You can continue to invest in SEO, and all of those strategies don't change because you have to also be findable on Google. But that's what I would do. And if you haven't seen material uptick in that 90 days, you've probably got a brand and a messaging problem or a consistency problem. And I think that's where a lot of like integrated marketing can fall apart, is like just the sheer volume of crisply produced content that echoes perfectly across your site. Like it's a huge volume of work to do.
Really good. So, Raj, how are you going about growing Aikido's? How do you go about extracting more value out of the LLMs at Aikido?
Yeah, so one of the things we do is using a tool called Peak AI. Well, one thing I should kind of caveat that with is there are a number of tools like this, like Peak AI. The issue with them, or the benefit of them, is you can get an idea of the kind of visibility you have on LLMs. So you can kind of see for a number of prompts which you decide you want to kind of choose or select, you can see how well your brand is performing in terms of visibility compared to your peers who you can also set in that kind of target. The difficulty with them, or the issue with them, is that ChatGPT, Claude, etc., do not hand over their data to these companies. So what they're basing this on is them kind of prompting themselves numerous times to get that data back. And of course, that's very subjective because, you sometimes get someone in your company saying, why are we not showing up for this prompt? And the reason is, well, actually, it is showing up for me, but not for you, or it may be showing up for someone else, is because it's probabilistic. So a lot of the times, you're going to get different prompts back from different people. So that's why the overall visibility is good to see from Peak AI, but it doesn't tell the whole story. It doesn't tell you about sentiment as well. So you may get visibility, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily the best in the market for anything. There are other tools out there that are now trying to fill that gap of sentiment. And there are a few tools that we've been speaking to that are trying to fill both those gaps, as well as like a kind of, the whole function of content, from kind of knowing what to write to helping you write it to feeding the LLMs, etc. All of those things I think are very, very early on, and I don't think we're at a stage yet where any of these things are mature enough to say, yeah, like SEO tools are pretty much, you can although a lot of them are based on assumptions as well, the data is still very, very credible, and you can kind of say this is linked to this, right? Whereas with this LLM data, it's still a little bit like, yeah, okay, it's giving us some sort of measurement which we need, and without that measurement we can't see how successful we are. But we're still very early on. I think in the next 2 years, maybe less than that, because of the way everything is getting better quite quickly, we'll have some very mature platforms which can actually give us more insight, and maybe there'll be a better way for the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI to provide more data. I don't know how that would work in practice, because of course they've got no incentive to share that data, really. So yeah, right now that's what we're doing, and we're looking at all the options, because I think it's the number one important thing is to have some sort of measurement, some sort of visibility, as well as all the kind of fundamentals that kind of Anna mentioned. One of the things that we've done as well in terms of on page is kind of adding those FAQs, for example, especially to the SEO style articles, where that's where you get those long tail answers as well, right? So sometimes they don't naturally come up in a blog format, especially if we're trying to not write like a machine and we're trying to write like writers. Therefore, an FAQ section is pretty valuable for that reason as well, to separate the kind of more opinionated maybe article side from the, hey, here's the structure, here's just the clean answers that you want, and here's what will actually also get picked up, as long as the schema is also right for the LLMs.
That's great insights, and I definitely agree with you that it's still very much like it's a very young industry, the LLM measuring industry. I came back from summer vacation last year, and just we were using Ahrefs for SEO, and it's a fantastic tool for that. But I signed up to the Brand Radar product, and I think it was so early on that just they didn't have any data in there. I haven't checked in after I signed up for a month or two, but I think all of these vendors are just getting better at the moment, and maybe being a bit conservative, you risk being like a little bit of a guinea pig at the moment. I haven't tried other tools, so I should say that with a pinch of salt, right? But it's a super interesting industry. I would love us if we could change to kind of maybe if you guys would share some anecdotes of content that has clearly worked or ranked well or gotten a lot of citations inside of LLMs. And maybe just anecdotally, I can start out saying that when we look at the pages that gets the most traffic on the Dream Data website from these LLMs, it's clearly there were articles that we do that contains proprietary data, meaning like, for example, benchmark data. 6 out of the top 10 pages that we get the most traffic to from LLMs are pages where they are about like proprietary data. So there's definitely something about providing that the LLMs really eat up, where you have something unique to offer them that they haven't already been training on before. Daisy, what's been one of your few greatest hits for LLMs?
Yeah, I think obviously the bottom of funnel content, I won't bring that up again, but yeah, bottom of funnel content definitely. And then also really looking at your website real estate and considering, have I like optimized this for information that maybe LLMs don't already know? We ran a kind of shift in some of the messaging across our like core footers that are obviously highly referenced across the website because they're used across multiple pages, to ensure that we had a kind of like core proof point in there, rather than just having like something generic like a newsletter sign up or kind of directing users to like another resource, because generally in a lot of pages people don't really get to the bottom anyway. So I think just really looking at your website and kind of considering like across kind of core substances like that, am I sort of using the best content I can here, and if not, updating it. That worked pretty well for us when we updated our footer, and it was sort of pulling through in LLMs in like a matter of hours, I'd say. So yeah, that would be my top tip.
I can almost guess it, but maybe you can just like, when you say bottom of funnel content, can you just like say a few more words of what is bottom of funnel content
of
for you?
course. Yeah. So bottom of funnel content is focused on sort of more commercial keywords that are very closely related to your brand. And when someone is in market searching for a tool like yours, so for example, when I was at Cognizant, that would like look like tools around terms around kind of B2B data providers, or sales intelligence tools, like those sorts of things. And then there's lots of other bottom of funnel content you can focus around, like sort of competitors or kind of like core use cases where someone's maybe sort of experiencing an issue that your tool can help with, or they're sort of trying to do something specific. Just really content that is so closely aligned with your product, that when someone is searching and they have sort of encountered a roadblock or an issue, or they're looking for a solution like yours, and they're aware of that solution that they need to go out and buy, that you're appearing.
I agree. Start there rather than the opposite.
Start there, because top of funnel is just getting heated.
And what's your evergreen, or what's your one of your good wins on LLMs?
Yeah. So I pulled up Dream Data before this call, and I've got our LLM report open right now. And so I'm like looking at our top 10 URLs with the most views by LLMs. And I'm not surprised at all by what I'm seeing. It's our blog, and it's anytime we're talking about like Canva or OpenAI's pricing and how they built things. And so a lot of the content that we've created on the blog is as a billing company, we like to analyze how other people in the industry are doing things, even if we're not doing a case study on them, and even if we're not, benefiting from that in any way. But the fact that that index is really highly tells me the signal you can take away from is, if your brand is curious about what your competitors are doing, or what big logos that everyone knows that are household names are doing, take a stab at analyzing that. Have an authoritative voice and an opinion. To Suraj's point, of your brand needs to have an opinion, and I think that that's something that indexes really well. And then in general, just like what I'm seeing in this live view is like people want to understand how to do things. And so I'm seeing lots of our blog posts and our documentation and our technical docs about like how to price things, like SaaS pricing models that are common, et cetera. So I think what we're kind of hitting on is that your brand is no longer something that just like can only rank on SEO and just only rely on, how much money you give Google. SEO is still critical to this entire strategy, but there's much more onus on brands to produce content that is thoughtful and oriented to how people are researching pricing or your product. And in your space, you have to look to, okay, who are like the people that we look up to that are like admirable in the space, that are established companies? How do they do things? And I think the more that you talk about that, and the more volume of discourse and content you're creating, the more you'll kind of hit at like how people are actually searching for you and encountering your brand in the wild.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing it. So Raj, is there any like particular thing, particular blog post, particular piece of content that comes to mind that worked out for you guys?
Yeah, actually kind of different to Daisy is because we were new to a space, or it's a completely new space in the industry. It was AI penetration testing, for example. So the top of funnel articles there actually worked pretty well in terms of LLM pickup, because if you can own a space before it's even kind of a thing, then obviously it's a great place to be. So that's one side. The other side, something that is probably a gap in terms of our tracking, is more like if we're thinking about things that have led to signups or directly to revenue or influencing revenue, then they are more likely to obviously be those commercial articles, those bottom of the funnel articles comparing us to competitors, etc. So so those are technically doing better overall than, say, the kind of more opinionated pieces. However, we're getting in like completely new contacts or completely new people from the kind of more opinionated pieces, which are not alternative to X vendor or top 10 supply chain tools or whatever it is. So yeah, it's a range of all of kind of everywhere that has worked, and there's probably places where we fare really well, but we don't know because we're not tracking those. We're tracking the commercial gains, really, right? So like if you have to pick the prompts that you want to track, you want to rank for, you're only going to really look at the ones that are going to directly lead to revenue. So that's a fundamental gap, I think, that probably all marketing teams are going to have as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Just so it's not, this conversation is not confined to the questions I ask, I want to ask you guys, is there any kind of idea or tactic that we have not talked about related to this that we should have talked about, or that is worth mentioning? Or what is just kind of like, what is the takeaway you want people to take from here, whether it's repeating something we've said already or like coming up with something new that we haven't touched? Daisy, you want to go with that, the easy question?
Yeah, I think just reiterating that LLM visibility is not just purely an SEO problem. If you're not showing up, it's definitely something to do with your like brand and messaging, which obviously comes from like the top down. So yeah, I think just really making sure that you're getting into those spaces and kind of trying to influence conversations there. Uh, and then I think another important thing to note is just like with a lot of things in SEO, I don't sort of truly believe that the kind of little hacks are as effective as a lot of kind of people make them out to be. There's kind of as with like anything that's kind of new, there's a lot of kind of people trying to cut corners and do kind of little hacky things, as was the way with SEO. But I think it's not ever really going to build kind of like good longevity in your strategy, and it's not really the way to go. So I think just keeping kind of true and trusting in the process of building something more long term is what will win in the long term.
Sounds reasonable. Anna, what's one thing we haven't talked about that we should have mentioned here?
I think I have two kind of key takeaways for this. The first is in terms of things that you can do today, audit your public narrative for LLM readability. So ask yourself and get the smartest people in the room at your company and say, can a model easily answer like what we do, for whom, and in what situations we're a best fit and why? And if you keep to that ethos, I think you're going to find success and you're going to create content that's more worthwhile and shows up in this new world that we're in. And then the second thing I would say is stop shipping high volume, low signal content. You're not going to win if you just produce a bunch of AI stuff that wasn't created thoughtfully, because it's going to dilute your brand. And it's so tempting in the world we live in, and everyone is moving so quickly. They're thinking like, oh, well, if we just get 17 blog posts out tomorrow, it'll index and we'll be great, right? an LLM is not your brand. It can index things, it should be readable by a machine, but ultimately you've got to hire really smart people and you're hiring their brains when you think about brand, product, content. That is integral. And then the most successful companies that I see in this space, in tech in general, are the ones that have an authoritative voice, that have like a podcast, that have, multiple modes of intellectual discovery and discourse about what they're producing.
That's great. What you said, Anna, just made me think that maybe perhaps companies should start just having FAQs on the front page as well, or at least down in the bottom, because then when the LLM
Yep.
arrives, you can control somewhat the narrative of what it's picking up and saying about you.
Absolutely. Like, hire really smart humans, get them to write really cool things, and then
Yeah.
use a machine to make sure that the really cool human stuff is indexable and that it, reinforces your brand.
That's great. So, Raj, what's one thing people should take with them today on this topic?
Yeah, I guess just on the back of Anna's point there, just, what's the point of getting your content surfaced if it sounds like everyone else's content and if it doesn't really, have a voice or brand? But the one thing I would say is, which we kind of touched on, was the fact that it matters more actually now what other people are saying about you, whether that's the forums, whether that's the actual review sites, whether that's publications. And I think there's a stat where Aerops did a study where it's like 85% of LLM searches are from third parties, to come from third party sources. So kind of own content is still important. It's still important to have a ton of, the content that you're doing it well, but start focusing on kind of getting all of that other stuff right as well, across the board, because it's becoming more and more important. Definitely more important than it was.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's it, guys. We're through this 1 hour. Anna, Daisy, Suraj, thank you so much for taking the time. If you're listening to this after we were live, do go in and comment if you strongly disagree with people or do ask questions. I'm sure if you tag them, then they will get back to you on your questions. And just do connect with these very smart content marketers here because I think you can learn a lot from them.
We hope you like listening to us. Subscribe to our podcast and the ones that we have been guests on.
And if you have any feedback for us, just do let us know. And should there be a guest that you think we should be talking to, then pitch us.
We're looking forward to seeing you.